429, so I'll just ask everyone to turn their cameras on and come back into the meeting. Mr. Nolan, we are continuing to stream live. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Okay. So members of council, previous to the presentation, I'd indicated that I had interest in introducing a motion without notice. Because it's related to the presentation, I would like to proceed with that now, although a different motion than previously discussed. We're going to proceed with that prior to the second presentation, and then we'll have the staff presentation once we've had a chance to talk about this motion. It is moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Ward that pursuant to section 7.1 of the procedural bylaw, permission be granted to introduce a motion without notice concerning Shack's World opportunities. That is the procedural motion to allow the new motion to be put on the floor. That does require a 2/3 vote. Anyone want to comment on the procedural motion? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. Those in favor of allowing the motion without notice? Okay, any opposed? None, that carries. Thank you for that. It is moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Ward that staff in the Recreation and Culture Department be directed to meet with Shack's World to identify opportunities, including the leasing of the former City of Barrie Youth Center at 59A Maple Avenue, as well as city facilities, to host her proposed programming and report back to General Committee on September 14th, 2020. I'll be brief, members of council, in introducing this. I heard the frustration previously on the process. I understand that members of council are not prepared, given the amount of information that was available for a council meeting midsummer, to proceed with the funding for a lease. The only thing I can say is we are not meeting with reference committees at the moment or advisory committees. There simply is no other process available to me to bring this remarkable young community leader to us and ask for council's financial support to proceed with the programming. That being said, I understand the concern. I understand that we are frequently asked for these sorts of partnership initiatives or financial support. That it would be the feeling of council that, what I took away from your initial comments was extreme frustration about the process, in no small part because you want to support this, but you got a lot, but some of you have many more questions. I think, if I might, in getting to know Ms. Edwards over the last month, and in understanding the work she's done as a not-for-profit in the town of Innisfil and over the last 5 years, there's just no question that we should be doing everything we can to bring her programming into our community. I will say, in defense of the 59A Maple space, that was the Barrie Youth Center. It was a City of Barrie facility. It was fit out as a gym by the City of Barrie. And that investment from many years ago, we now have the opportunity to use again for a youth center, but this time geared at the needs of, in particular, the Black community in Barrie. I think that, Ms. Edwards' vision is broader than that. It's more ambitious than that. It probably raises some questions that we can work with her to answer in the month that is available now before the proposed report back to General Committee. I would prefer that we proceed right away because I know that she has a significant number of parents who want to put their kids into her programs. They want those programs to run tomorrow. Our process is stuck the way it is because of COVID and because of the summer. I would say to you that I made a few efforts over the last 3 weeks to try and raise some outside funding for Ms. Edwards, and I'll be frank, I wasn't successful. And that's no commentary on her, probably more of a commentary on me. But I'm going to continue in the interim because every week that she's delayed, I think is a missed opportunity. And I believe that set aside whatever other partnerships she's able to put together and nail down to use the space in terms of other community groups. The core work that Shaq's World does is a need in our community and an opportunity for us to get behind this incredibly inspiring young member of our community, her board, her partnership with the Raptors, and her partnership with the Canadian Basketball Mentorship Association, which is a national charity. So this is not the motion I had hoped that we could pursue, but I understand the concerns, and you know, I fully recognize the risk in bringing this to you in this fashion tonight. But I would simply urge you to support this motion. This will give you a report back to council in a month. I would be delighted to set up a meeting for any of you with Ms. Edwards and her board, so you can ask your questions and satisfy yourself about what she does, far better than we could do in a 10-minute council presentation and questions tonight. So I'll leave it there and open the floor for comments and questions on the motion. Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'm incredibly disappointed and saddened by what has happened this evening with Shaq's proposal and the way she was kind of let out to dry in front of us and the public tonight. But I think this is also a great learning opportunity for all of us about the broader issues that I know Shaq is extremely passionate about and that are at the forefront of some of the big conversations happening in our city and around the world, frankly. Systemic racism. What is that? Like we know what individual racism is, when someone is hateful towards another or holds hateful views. But what is systemic racism? Systemic racism is racism that is pervasive throughout a system. So that could be a corporation, it could be a schooling system, it could be a municipal government. And sometimes these forms of systemic racism aren't readily obvious to those looking in, especially to those who are privileged by the system.
Point of order, Mayor Lehman. The member of council is implying that council was racist to Shaq. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry.
I didn't hear the member of council accuse council of being racist. I understand for Councillor Morales that the remarks are starting to be targeted at council and not the motion that's on the floor. So Councillor Owen, you're addressing an incredibly important issue. Please go ahead. But if you could please address the motion on the floor as well.
Absolutely. So very obviously there's a lack of understanding about what systemic racism is versus individual racism. So tonight we were to be considering a motion to allocate $42,000 from the Community Benefit Reserve to Shaq's program. There's a space waiting, readily available. That organization is reputable. It's got a strong track record in the community with strong partners, as we've seen. And we heard from Mayor Lehman just a second ago that there are parents who have their kids ready to be in the program tomorrow. Now, I would normally understand the reservation around the $42,000, but I just found it incredibly striking that just a month ago at our special meeting, council, when discussing a motion that was brought up during the meeting, last minute, about parking along the waterfront, we had no problem allocating $42,000 to temporary parking signage to address the parking issues along the waterfront with, I might add, no evidence that it would even be enforceable or that it would be effective in solving the problems that we were trying to solve. We passed that motion, $42,000. And now we have an organization that's reputable, that has a strong track record in the community, with strong partners, that does great work and where there's a great need now, and all of a sudden we balk at $42,000, I think we need to ask ourselves, why is it that we didn't hesitate with the $42,000 for temporary signage for 3 months, but now we're hesitating for $42,000 for a program for 6 months, twice the amount of time, with likely a much greater and broader and deeper impact that could be felt for generations. So I hope all of us can do some thinking around the table about what systemic racism is and how it plays out in our lives and how we all may be responsible for it. And I know I sound like I'm lecturing, but this is what these conversations are about. They're uncomfortable, they're difficult. It's not some easy thing where you pass a motion saying we condemn racism and that's it, we're done. No, these are the difficult things we need to reevaluate. So I would hope that we would take a good hard look at what we're doing tonight and ask why we feel comfortable delaying this until mid-September, when there's a need right now and when we have made decisions on the fly with less information in the past, just recently. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Owen. Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was very inspired and very prepared to be supporting the original motion. I do completely appreciate the conversation between process and the wealth of information and lots of questions. I'm fully supportive of if we proceed, I'd like to proceed forward in some way. If it is off the table around considering any type of immediate funding to allow that to happen, my interpretation of this is that while it's posed that a report back come to General Committee on September 14th, at best, we'd be then looking at council meeting on the 21st that would give any potential next steps for movement at that time. I also wanted to reflect on, we've also seen some very difficult conversations happening with other community resources in the past week. I believe we've seen a public message from our YMCA, Simcoe Muskoka, unfortunately not being able to open the Barrie facilities. At this time, we're then going to be mid-month into a school year. So I am fully supportive of this going forward. If there's a different way to expedite it, I would be aligned to that. I think focusing any way we could support moving this along would be great, and I'm happy to explore that. But either way, I'm not sure if this is the only option ahead, then I'll proceed with it. But I was hoping that we could look at something that would at least allow them to start planning a move in. It'd be brilliant to see somebody finally in that facility and using an existing resource and one that benefits youth in a broad space that benefits across the city. So those are my comments. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Just a reminder to council, the motion can be amended. It's on the floor. Next, I have Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I need to take a deep breath here. First of all, I don't think that anyone on council is disagreeing that there is systemic racism. And I don't think that anyone on council is not interested genuinely in pursuing this program from Shaq's World. I'm actually quite disappointed that prior to 6:36 tonight, we only had the offerings that this was going to be a presentation. And then at 6:36 p.m., the first motion was presented to us. So that's the end of the story. We didn't have any time to even consider that this was going to be a motion on the floor, because it was obviously a motion without notice. I understand that, but it's a motion without notice that absolutely deserves due process and deserves the time that we each individually as counselors require on our personal levels to have answered before we give this money to whomever it is. And I don't think it's in the same category as, you know, funding the bylaw or the parking signs that we needed because for topics surrounding the beaches that we've had for pretty much all summer long. I feel mad actually that this is like, it's implied that we have a problem with this program. We're literally just wanting time to have some answers to questions that we have that are valid. It has nothing to do with whether or not we agree or disagree with the topic of systemic racism. And then to have a lecture from Councillor Aylwin that because we want to have due process with this presentation, that we are not addressing systemic racism is insulting to me. And my question to Councillor Aylwin then is, other than standing up at rallies, what are you doing? What evidence do you have that programs that you are implementing in your ward right now and programs that you are providing assistance with in the city of Barrie that actually address systemic racism? What boots on the ground programs are you participating in other than lecturing the rest of council tonight that we wanted to have a little bit more time to consider a wonderful program that literally in 10 minutes, in my personal opinion, presented probably 100 questions that could probably be answered 100%. I have no doubt about that. I really look forward to meeting all of the people from Shaq's World. And none of the counselors on this board have any doubt that she has not been doing amazing things for our community. So in my opinion, what should have happened was the motion was too late. The presentation happened. End of story. You're right. We need some due process and we need to actually go through the questions and get the answers that we have instead of saying that we're running out of time and this needs to happen when we didn't have any time to even consider it. And a lecture about systemic racism right now, absolutely unacceptable because it affects all of us as well. And city councillors on this council are really working hard and putting boots on the ground to address that systemic racism. And that's it. Pepsi's here to say hi.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was very impressed by the young lady and by her proposal. I think she's proposing something that is very needed in this community. However, we had a proposal a few months ago for this very same building. I don't remember how much money they were looking at, but we sent the bricks away saying, you know, you need to come back to us with a business plan so that we know that the hard-earned taxpayer money that we're putting into a private organization is going to be well spent and well managed, and there's going to be some sustainability coming out of it. And I think that what we're doing here is exactly the same thing. I think your proposed motion, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to support. I think what we're doing is we're just asking them to look, have a good discussion with our staff. I'm sure that our staff are going to ask them for a business plan. How are you going to spend this money that you're asking for? And how does that contribute to your long-term stability? I think that it's only reasonable as guardians of the taxpayers' dollars to ask those kind of questions and to expect those kind of answers. And you know what? I fully expect that we will get some good answers for that, and we'll be satisfied. I'm hoping we will, because it sounds to me like this is a really good plan. So I'll be supporting your motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ritma. Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and I'll be supporting this motion. It's and I don't think it's anybody's fault. It's not Ms. Edwards' fault or anybody's fault that we were rushed on this tonight. I mean, we're trying to do things, and it's a combination of things, as is pointed out. The fact that we're in the pandemic, the fact that we're not meeting regularly, and the fact that she wanted to move right away. But I don't think that's an excuse for ignoring our process. And I always hate being rushed on. Being told on council, I have to make a decision tonight or it's lost. I know, and I think back to it's a very different situation, but I've always regretted the Dunlop Street Arena thing. We were told we have to make a decision on the Dunlop Street Arena tonight. We're going to lose that funding, federal funding. We made an arena, and all weeks after I thought we should have given that more thought. Like, was that really the best thing to do to tear down that arena? Was that the only site the firefighters could use? I mean, whenever I'm forced to make a decision in a hurry, I always go back regret it. So I don't think. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate. We're going to have to wait a month, but I think its process is very important. I'd like to point out that we have. When we give out about 100,000 or maybe a bit more in arts grants this year, we require a lot from those groups. Some of these groups are applying for $1,000 and $2,000. We're asking them to provide us with a list of their board of directors, the description of everybody on that board of directors, what the board of directors does, the organizational structure, the how their plan works, their business plan, their operations plan, the human services plan. We ask all these things for groups that are asking for a couple of $1,000s from us because it's taxpayers' money. We have a duty to make sure that we're giving it to groups. And one of the big things about it that we ask those groups applying for arts funding, what's their plan to get community involvement? What is their plan? Sustainability, community involvement. How are you going to sell this to the community? How's the community going to benefit? So I think, you know, asking a group that's asking for $46,000, whatever, asking for this information, it's I don't regret it at all. I mean, it'd be nice to do it quicker, but I think process is an excuse to avoid something. It's a good reason for putting process in place. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Councillor Morales.
Oh boy. I support the motion on the floor, Mayor Lehman, and I'll tell you why. To the comments that Councillor Alwyn has made, I have made a very conscious effort since the beginning of this term to not go after Councillor Alwyn on a personal basis. When he went after us just now on this motion, or on the previous discussion in the motion as presented by Mayor Lehman, honestly, like that's just enough. And I just wrote some notes here. I am so emotionally drained that I now live in fear that anytime that I don't vote a way that Councillor Alwyn feels acceptable, that I'm going to be lectured, lambasted, and attacked. Now, it's fine to disagree on the points, but the whole we should be disappointed or the collective lecturing is honestly emotionally exhausting. We should be talking about Shaq's world right now. We should be having more of a discussion. This takes away from that. And it has happened more than once. I still vote the way I do. And I usually don't call it out personally, but I'm getting to the point where when you don't call this behavior out and it continues, you got to call it out. And maybe I have to call it out, but I'm honestly, Councillor Alwyn, I am tired of you pouting every time something doesn't go your way. On the motion on the floor, Mayor Lehman, you just showed that you're a leader. Councillor Alwyn, you've continually shown that you are not a leader. You talk about mental health, how it's important. You have created a toxic workplace right now. And you've done that for over a year. I'm literally shaking right now. The focus should be on this. Councillor Ritma made great points about the previous applications that we've done and the scrutiny that they've received. And that's what we've been asking for this, to have not only the lecture, but the very subtle, very well worded, by the way, but the very subtle implication that City Hall municipal government, and by extension us as a council, were showing biases or prejudices tied to systemic racism based on the presentation from Shaq. That's an insult to her. That's an insult to us. And that takes away from the attention. And I'm glad this motion by Mayor Lehman brings it back to that, because that's what it should be about. And again, I shouldn't be living with this fear of being lectured and being attacked. And thank you, Councillor Natalie Harris, for also commenting similar thoughts. It's detracting away from the business that we could do. I've said it before, Councillor Alwyn, it detracts away from the great potential that you have. And it's just exhausting.
it's getting a little late and a little hot, but I understand the comments from all members of council tonight. I understand that this is raising some emotions. I will ask that the comments be targeted at the motion that's on the floor. Is there another member of council who wishes to speak to the motion that's on the floor? Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I will be supporting your motion, and I sincerely appreciate you bringing this back in this form. You know, Shaq's a lover of sports, and so am I, and so are some other councillors around the table, and we played sports. And as athletes, we expect a couple things. One thing is it's a meritocracy. You put in, you get out what you put in. And also, you expect to understand and have fair rules of the game. And I think what we've let you down, Shaq, in is we don't have the rules of the game well established here tonight for you to be able to be fairly assessed with your proposal. And what we're asking to do is to take that time to apply proper process so that your organization can be supported and protected throughout this process. And I think one thing that came up for me before, and someone's referenced the bricks, and I will say that, you know, the Community Benefit Fund Reserve is a great tool to have, but I think one of our challenges is it doesn't have great structure around who and how and how it gets assessed. So one of the things I will do moving forward for all members of our community, it will be talking with staff about how we can create some sort of section from that reserve such that we can have a fund that people can apply to understanding the rules, the process, the measure, and how it's sorted out. And I know other members of this council, and I won't point them out, but they've worked like me in human services, understand that process and application for funds at all levels of government. There's a method for doing that, and we all play by the same rules. And I can tell you with, you know, I had the pleasure of working with Women's Health and Women's Hand in Toronto for a mental health program for Black women. And we got funding from the federal government last year before I came back to work in Barrie. So I have a little bit of history with working with groups and getting funding for things. And I'd love to work with you to help you with this in some way. But this process, I'm sorry, is not allowing us to do that for you. And for that, I apologize. And thank you, Mayor Lehman. I will support your amendment.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Just a question to you, the mover. I will be supporting this due to the process. Is the $42,000 the startup cost? If we were able to raise that corporately, would that remove it from the city, or if we go to partners? And can I get a little bit of clarification?
Yeah, and you know, members of council, yes, Councillor Thompson, I'll just answer your question. Yes, it would. I approached Ms. Edwards about her own fundraising efforts. She has been quite successful already with securing sponsors, some of whom were outlined in her presentation to us tonight, but not enough to also carry the lease costs as well as the startup and operating costs for a program. With regards to a lease in the specific space, you know, there is a strength to the city backing a program, and that can help an organization really get the start it needs. However, if we can raise money or assist Ms. Edwards in raising money for her programs, then you know, the thought here was never that the city would lease a facility or undertake renos or any of the sorts of things that have been talked about previously. This was a grant to fund a 6-month lease for a pilot. I believe that our staff, you know, our staff in the rec department can talk about whether or not there is the potential to host somewhere else right away. But I think the funding that we were talking about, the 42, Councillor Thompson, was specific to a lease of 59A Maple.
So the short answer is, if we're able to raise $42,000 and they meet all the checks and check all the boxes and to staff, we would not fund it from the community reserve. We would just write a check corporately.
To be frank, Councillor Thompson, if members of council are able to assist Shack in raising the money outside of the city, she can probably go faster than through these processes. And no, there would be no public money involved.
So I invite Shack to contact me tomorrow.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Thompson. Are there others who wish to comment on the motion that's on the floor? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will definitely support the motion that's now on the floor. I actually wish things would have worked out a little bit differently. I wish we would have had a little bit more heads up as to what was coming, especially since now I'm hearing that this seems like it was in the works for at least a 3 to 4 week period anyway. And I think the discussion around the table would have been very different if we would have each potentially even had a phone call to have a discussion about this. So then we could educate ourselves about what this was all going to be about, because it's not fair to this poor girl to only have her 10 minutes of a presentation and we're immediately supposed to be making a decision, even though it's not like a massive amount of money, but it's still large enough that we have to be prudent about where the funds are going and who we're giving them to. But definitely very supportive of the concept that we were told about, but definitely in need of more information. But I do have a real issue with the whole tone of the way tonight's gone. And I hope there's some lessons learned tonight, because this has got to stop. We cannot, night after night, have the life sucked out of us, being reprimanded because we don't vote the way a particular person thinks we should vote. I don't know how that someone thinks that they're higher up than anyone else around the table to day after day always be reprimanding us. And to think that we're being accused of being systemic racist, I find appalling. You have no clue what's going on behind the scenes, and the fact that I personally have been having some conversations with the CAO, the mayor, and our service partners exactly about that exact thing: systemic racism and potentially some of our hiring practices here within the city. And I am just totally disgusted with some of the accusations that have gone on here tonight. And I will leave it at that, but enough is enough.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Are there any other comments on the motion that's on the floor? Councillor Owen, you've spoken. I'm sorry. It is, you can only speak once.
I have an amendment.
On the floor. Okay, go ahead with the amendment, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. So the amendment is to fund a 6-month lease of 59 Maple Avenue by Shack's World. So it's to strike the wording of the motion that's currently on the floor and replace it with that further to the presentation to City Council on August 10th, 2020, that a grant be provided in an amount not to exceed $42,000 from the Community Benefit Reserve to fund a 6-month lease of 59 Maple Avenue by Shack's World, a nonprofit, beginning in September 2020, for the purpose of providing basketball camps for youth at risk, and that staff report back by memo on the details of the pilot project at a future general committee meeting. I can speak to that.
Okay, do you have a seconder?
Do I have a seconder? Anyone? All right, that's how it is.
Okay, I don't see a seconder for the amendment. Okay, is there anyone, we're back on the main motion then. Are there further amendments or anyone who hasn't spoken that wishes to speak to the main motion? Councillor Thompson, I think you've already spoken. Did you have a question of procedure or an amendment? Sorry, you're still muted, Councillor Thompson.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Lehman, because I use my iPad, I don't have the motion in front. Was there a part of a request of a business plan involved in that motion?
No.
Could I pass an amendment to have a business plan when meeting with staff?
You would require a seconder, and we do need you to provide that in writing to the clerk. So we can take a minute for you to do that.
So, yeah, I'll send her a text. instead of wasting time, if there's somebody who would second that.
Okay, Councillor Kungle, I saw her hand first.
Sorry, give me a second here. I
Yep,
apologize.
of course. Councillor Thompson, take all the time you need. So my
You don't mean that
suggestion-
literally.
He's never uttered those words to me.
Okay, Madam Clerk, Ms. Cook, go ahead.
Is he going to produce a brand new motion? Because the motion that Councillor Aylwin was putting forward is not on the floor because he never had a seconder. So you can't.
No,
Okay.
no, this is on the motion that is on the floor, the original direct motion.
Okay. I'm just wanting clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. No, there wasn't a seconder for Councillor Aylwin's amendment. Yeah. So Councillor Thompson is proposing an amendment to the motion. Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Kungle, and the wording I'll let you read that, Councillor Thompson.
Mayor Lehman, I'm sorry that my camera goes on and off. I have no power on my computer, so I have to keep switching back and forth on my phone. So I'm still here. I can still hear you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, how are we doing on wording?
I just sent something to the clerk. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but I'll wait for her direction.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thompson.
Okay. So Councillor Thompson's amendment would be to. Just want to make sure I'm inserting it in the right spot. Just probably after programming is to include that a business plan be presented. We're just going to insert the words that a business plan be presented after programming, including a proposed business plan. I think that.
Sorry, so just to clarify, Councillor Thompson, were you expecting the business plan as part of the report back to general committee, or yeah, okay. Okay, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Everyone clear on the amendment that's on the floor? Okay, who would like to speak to the amendment, if any? Okay, I will call the question on the amendment. Those in favor of the amendment to add the business plan requirement? Okay, any opposed? None, that carries. On the main motion as amended, are there any further amendments or questions about procedure? I believe everybody has had the opportunity to speak, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. Those in favor of the motion on the floor as amended, please indicate. Are any opposed? None, that carries. Okay, thank you, members of council. I think we've been a bit of a victim of process, and as the guy who's supposed to steer council's process, I'll take responsibility for that as I did earlier. Unfortunately, not a lot of options here, but I also think that debate ended up going somewhere it probably did not need to go. We'll talk about this again when it comes back in September. I've been advised that staff can put off the second presentation till the next general committee meeting. It is not time sensitive, but it is fairly in depth. So staff are actually, Mr. Prowse, I believe we're okay to do that at the next general committee meeting or next council meeting?
Yes, Mayor Lehman, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, that brings us to inquiries. Deputy Mayor Ward, do you have any inquiries?
I have none.
Members of council, do you have any inquiries? Okay, seeing none. Announcements, members of council. Deputy Mayor Ward, no? Okay, Councillor Natalie Harris and then Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. We won't probably be meeting before this occurs, so I just wanted to recognize it publicly that the city is going to have a lifeguard recognition day on August 19th. It's an informal because of COVID right now, so it's not really a large gathering type of invitation, but I thought it was really important to say, you know, here online, I guess, that we are so grateful for your services and all the hard work that you do. We know that you work very closely with all the first responders and with city staff. You have so much training and so much time goes into what you do to provide the safety that you give to the city of Barrie and all the residents that visit our beaches. And I really think I went through lifeguard training. I couldn't pass the last level. Like, it is hard. It is really, really hard. And I love swimming. So I just really commend you for all that you do and for all the lives that you impact in so many positive ways. And with that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Yeah, we're looking forward to that for sure. Councillor Aylwin, announcements.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'd like to draw people's attention to two neighborhood meetings that are happening tomorrow, Tuesday, August 11th at 5 p.m. They are virtual neighborhood meetings about two proposed developments, separate developments, but both at the intersection of Bayfield Street and Sophia Street East. So these neighborhood meetings can be accessed by registering online. So you can actually head to my website, keenan.ca, KEENAN.ca, and on the front page you'll find a button that says click to register under neighborhood meetings, and you can register for that Zoom meeting. So this is an opportunity to get your first look at what the proposed development is. A formal application hasn't even been submitted yet, and it's a great opportunity to learn more and get your questions answered. So that's tomorrow, Tuesday, August 11th, 5 p.m. Go to keenan.ca and click here to register button to register. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Aylwin. Any other announcements, members of council? Okay, I do have a few. Since we will not be meeting for another 5 weeks, our new easy for me to say. New tax due dates are August 31st and October 30th. They have been published online on the City of Barrie's website, and they are on the bills that are going out. We are in the process of mailing those out. A reminder, Barrie Transit is now collecting fares as the riders can safely board at the front of the bus. You are required to wear a mask on Barrie Transit. Very important we continue to do so. Notwithstanding the low caseloads of COVID-19 in Barrie, we absolutely need to do these things to continue to stay safe. As of August 4th, Allendale Rec Center and Holly Community Center have reopened their doors for public use of the indoor pool and the fitness centers. You need to reserve in advance to use these facilities. They are $4 for a drop-in, and there's a family rate for swims. Unfortunately, the change rooms are not open for the moment. And until the rec centers are fully reopened, the memberships will be suspended without charge. East Bayfield Community Center scheduled to reopen after September 8th. Reminder that for the balance of the summer, tents and outdoor cooking appliances are not permitted on any beaches or in the park at Centennial, Dock Road Park, Heritage, Johnson's, Minette's Point Park, the North Shore Trail, Gables, Tyndall, and the Waterfront Heritage Trail. We've had to close a section of the Great Trail that runs along Whiskey Creek between Little and Young because of restoration work required after recent severe storms, intense thunderstorms that caused washouts. And a reminder, of course, that the COVID-19 emergency measures bylaw is still in effect for the time being. The bylaw, of course, helps to protect the health and safety of residents by regulating the distancing to help contain the spread of COVID-19. If you are thinking of organizing a community event or initiative, please contact Enforcement Services at 739-4241 or email to enforcement.services@barrie.ca. And the last thing I wanted to note tonight, I wanted to thank Council for voting in support of the Barrie Health Board. We passed it on consent earlier. We are the second of 5 organizations that's being asked to sign this really significant statement of intent to pursue upstream funding and address the root causes of not only crime and social issues in our community, but health issues as well at a population level. I do appreciate all of your support, members of Council. We will certainly see more detail about that in the fall, but it is for interest. It's at County Council tomorrow morning. And Deputy Mayor Ward, myself, and Councillors and Congo will be there for that as well. Before we move on to the bylaws, this is the last City Council meeting until September. We resume on Monday, September 15th. Deputy Mayor Ward, the bylaws, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, and 77.
Okay, it is moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, and 77. Comments or questions on any of these bills? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. Those in favor, please indicate. Those opposed? Okay, those are carried. Deputy Mayor Ward.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 78.
Right, it is moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 78. Councillor Jim Harris, would you care to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. Members will recall that we had addressed this at one of our last meetings prior to the break. And unfortunately, I had a little bit of a technical problem, so I didn't have my final word, and I thank you for the opportunity to do this now. And I'll give you a little bit of background. I'm trying to be, I know it's been a long night, but obviously these are all important issues, so I thank you for your indulgence. At General Committee during this, when 41 Yonge Street came up, I'd asked for referral, and Council was supportive of that, and I appreciate that greatly, because what I saw with this proposal was, some really good work had happened. The residents engaged, and I have lots of great residents who talked about this and gave feedback, provided concerns, but also provided constructive feedback. It wasn't just a NIMBY response. It was, hey, here are some important considerations that need to be looked at. And I will give credit also to the developer, who did make some notable changes on behalf with the residents' concerns. And some of those, were really important. They changed the entrance to the parking garage. They changed the back wall, which was a straight brick wall, which they put in windows, which would, increase the appearance for those who lived backing on Tomlin. Looking at the change in the stormwater pond after the conversations at General Committee, moving the outdoor amenity space from the east side or north side to more towards the south side of the building towards Yonge Street. So there were several things, and also increasing the parking to get it pretty close. It's a one parking space per unit allocation, given it's being in a corridor, but now it's 1.25 basically. So there was some positive moves. So I just wanted to note those, that the developer did make some moves, and based on the process, because there was concerns, and when it first came through the public meeting, that there was concerns that the process, was not going to be effective, and that the developer had pretty much had their mind made up. And I also recognize that when it came to the discussion again, that Mr. Bell in his deputation suggested that they were not interested in any further negotiating with the city. They really weren't looking at moving off of the density. So, so you basically asked us, please, time being important, make a decision, yes or no. And one of the challenges I saw with this, and I understand from both sides, residents were not willing to move from their 34, and the developer wasn't ready to move from the 67 units. And we kind of got into this. Nobody really wanted to give, because there was a sense that nobody was planning to make that first step towards, well, we could accept a little bit more. So we end up where we are, and I think we understand that it's in a corridor, and we understand that the densities are average. They're not absolutes. They're averaged across a corridor. And we recognize that Yonge Street is a main corridor, and is expected to change over the years, and be able to manage the traffic that will be going through that street. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to highlight the concerns that were raised, and the hope that was part of the ask for the referral, which was, to hopefully do some final tweaking to get this really in a great space. I think it's in a, it's in a space now where maybe the developer is not totally happy, and neither is the residents. But I mean, I think, I appreciate the feedback from fellow councillors and staff, and the efforts to make this, as palatable as possible, given the protests and the competing interests. And I thought about it, it's a lot about interests. I mean, whose interests? There's the developer, there's the residents, there's the city, there's the planner, there's council. I mean, so whose interests are we supporting? And obviously, as a resident, as the council 48, my residents are my interest, and certainly our city's interests are there as well. So having said that, I'd hoped for further negotiation. I understand why it got put back on the table in respect to process and getting this done. And so I ask you again to vote tonight. You have a chance to vote with a clear understanding again of the development and the concerns that are presented. And I ask you, to vote on this matter as you see best fit for the interests of residents of Ward 8 and the City of Barrie. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Appreciate you speaking at this point and raising those concerns. And I want to echo the efforts, and thank you for the efforts you've made. I mean, I've been in correspondence with some of the same residents that you have about their concerns on this file. I know there were some that contacted several members of council, but I know you worked with them. I know you advocated for them, and there are these situations where council is able to push for some change, and maybe it will not be all the change that everyone wants, but there were improvements made to this application, and I think the work that you did on behalf of your residents is really commendable. So even though we're at the final stage tonight, it is much appreciated. Okay, are there any other comments on the bylaw? This is Bill 78. Okay, I will call the question. Those in favor of the bylaw, please indicate. Any opposed? Okay, one, and that carries with one in opposition. Okay, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 79, confirmation bylaw.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 79. Comments or questions? Seeing none, those in favor of Bill 79? Are any opposed? None. That carries. I will mercifully take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Jim Harris, we are adjourned. Thank you, members of council. We'll see you on September 14th, if not sooner.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.